The crib was finished. It sat perfectly centered beneath the wide bay window, its pale maple rails smooth and untouched, the mattress still wrapped in a thin crinkle of factory plastic. The room smelled faintly of fresh paint and cedar oil, the kind of smell that suggested intention, planning, preparation, a future that had been carefully imagined. Afternoon light poured through the glass, turning dust motes into slow-floating sparks. But Eleanor Wright was gone. 7 months pregnant. No suitcase missing. No credit cards flagged. No frantic voicemail left behind. Just absence. And one envelope. It was taped neatly to the inside of the nursery door. Placed at eye level, the tape trimmed flush as if she'd measured it. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, unbranded. No return address. Only a name written in clean, deliberate handwriting. Ethan. Ethan Wright stood in the doorway for a long moment without stepping inside. He hadn't called her name yet. He hadn't checked the rest of the house. He stared at the envelope the way a man stares at a loading screen. He doesn't trust. The house around him was silent, but not empty silent. It was the curated silence of wealth, triple-pane glass, insulated walls, floors that absorbed sound. The kind of silence that didn't echo. The kind that waited. He loosened his tie with one hand, fingers unsteady, then stopped himself and smoothed it back into place. The silk was Italian, charcoal with a faint herringbone pattern, the sort of tie people notice without knowing why. His reflection in the nursery mirror looked unchanged, tall, controlled, early 40s, the faintest trace of gray at his temples. The man investors trusted, the man journalists quoted, the man whose pregnant wife had vanished from a locked house in an affluent suburb of Marin County without triggering a single alarm. He stepped forward and peeled the envelope from the door. Inside was not a letter. It was a card, heavy stock, for sentences. I saw you. I know what you are. Don't look for me. The baby deserves better. Ethan read it once. Then again. By the third time, something inside him went very still. It wasn't grief. Grief was loud. Grief came with heat and pressure and the instinct to collapse. This was colder, sharper, a sensation like stepping onto a frozen lake and hearing it crack. Not enough to break, but enough to understand the danger. I saw you. Saw him where? I know what you are. A liar? A cheat? Or something else. Don't look for me. Not a request. A directive. The baby deserves better. That was the line that did it. That was the line that shifted this from a domestic problem to a strategic one. Ethan folded the card carefully and slid it into his inner jacket pocket. His hand brushed the leather of his wallet, the slim rectangle of his phone. He didn't pull either out. His first call was not to the police. It was not to Eleanor's mother in Palo Alto, or to her sister in Portland, or to any of the friends who would have answered with immediate panic. He dialed his attorney. Arthur Bellows answered on the second ring. Ethan. She's gone, Ethan said. A pause. Just long enough to signal recalculation. Gone how? Left a note. Took nothing. Another pause, longer this time. Is there any indication of coercion? No. Any threats? Violence? No. Then you don't have a missing person. You have a voluntary absence. Especially if she left a note. She's 7 months pregnant. Which complicates optics, not legality, Arthur said calmly. Listen carefully. Do nothing for 24 hours. Call her phone. Leave messages. Text concern. Then, and only then, we involve law enforcement. You want to look cooperative, not reactive. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. She knows. Knew what? That's what I don't know. Arthur exhaled softly. Then we need to assume she knows everything, and act accordingly. The line went dead. Ethan stood alone in the nursery, the late sun sliding lower, casting long bars of light across the empty crib. He thought of the purifier Eleanor had insisted on buying, the absurdly expensive one with a digital display and replaceable filters. He'd teased her about it at the time, told her she was nesting too hard. She had smiled and said nothing. Downstairs, the rest of the house waited in pristine stillness. The kitchen counters were wiped clean, the stainless steel appliances reflecting light like water. A single mug sat by the sink. Cold tea ringed at the bottom. Eleanor's phone was not there. Neither were her keys. Ethan walked through the rooms methodically, not calling her name, not rushing. This was not a man searching for his wife. This was a man taking inventory. Bedroom, untouched. Closet. Her clothes still hung in color order, summer dresses pressed, coats wrapped in breathable covers. Bathroom. Toothbrush gone. Hairbrush gone. Prenatal vitamins gone. Not a disappearance. A departure. Outside, the neighborhood hummed with late-day normalcy. A gardener trimmed hedges 2 houses down. A Tesla rolled past, slowing over the speed bump. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed. Ethan sat at the kitchen island and stared at the granite surface, its veins running like fault lines beneath glass. Eleanor Wright had not been impulsive. In the 6 years he'd known her, she had never done anything without forethought. Before pregnancy, she'd been a forensic analyst specializing in corporate compliance. Quiet, exacting work that required patience and an eye for anomalies. She noticed patterns other people dismissed. She remembered details that didn't matter until they suddenly did. That was why he'd fallen in love with her. Or at least, that was what he told himself. His phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa called her. Landing early. Can we meet tonight? Ethan stared at the screen longer than necessary. Vanessa's name was saved without a photo, without an emoji, stripped of sentiment. CFO of Right Helix Group. Brilliant. Ruthless when required. Blonde, composed, and dangerously perceptive. And his lover. He typed back, not tonight. Family issue. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then, understood. Call me. He didn't. Instead, he stood and walked back upstairs, returned to the nursery as if pulled by gravity. He removed the card from his pocket and read it again. I saw you. If Eleanor had seen him with Vanessa, that was bad, but manageable. Affairs could be explained, minimized, spun. Prenups had clauses. Lawyers had playbooks. But Eleanor hadn't been emotional in that note. She'd been precise. I know what you are. That wasn't the language of betrayal. That was a language of diagnosis. Night fell without ceremony. Ethan turned on lights only as needed, leaving most of the house dim. He poured himself a glass of water, then set it down untouched. He called Eleanor's phone once, letting it ring to voicemail. Hey, he said, pitching his voice into concern. I'm home. Call me. He waited 5 minutes. Called again. This time, he let panic creep in. Ellie, please. I'm starting to get worried. By the 3rd call, his voice cracked convincingly. He texted her best friend, Lauren Mitchell. Have you heard from Eleanor? She's not home. The reply came quickly. No. She texted me this morning, though. Said she had errands. Everything okay? Ethan stared at the word errands. He replied, probably nothing. Pregnancy brain. Just checking. He did not sleep that night. By morning, the story was ready. He called the police exactly 24 hours after he'd first found the note. The responding officers were polite, professional, careful. The house was photographed. The note was bagged. Ethan sat on the couch, elbows on knees, head in hands, wearing the same clothes he'd worn the day before. He answered questions with practiced clarity, offering timelines, suggesting places Eleanor might have gone. He did not cry. He did not need to. Detective Ryan Keller arrived just after noon. Late 40s. Divorced. The kind of man who noticed shoes and fingernails and the way people spoke when they thought no one was judging. He listened. He watched. A note, Keller said, reading from the evidence bag. Interesting wording. She was emotional. Ethan said quietly, "The pregnancy, it changed things." Keller looked at him for a long second. Maybe. Outside, a news van idled at the curb. Someone had tipped them off. By evening, Eleanor Wright's face was everywhere. On screens, on timelines, smiling in carefully chosen photos, one hand always resting lightly over her stomach. Missing pregnant billionaire's wife. The phrase spread fast. Ethan watched the coverage from his office downtown, the glass walls reflecting his own image back at him. He fielded calls from board members, from investors, from people who wanted reassurance. He gave it to them. He did not know that Eleanor was sitting in a small, secure apartment 300 miles away, watching the same broadcast on mute, her face calm, her hand steady on her belly. He did not know that the note had done exactly what she intended. He did not know that this was only the opening move. And Eleanor, who had once balanced accounts down to the penny, who had learned to read lies in spreadsheets and guilt in timing discrepancies, did not think of herself as missing. She thought of herself as working. And Chapter 1 closed not with a scream or a chase or a confession, but with a man standing in a glass tower, believing he was still in control, unaware that the ground beneath him had already begun to shift. By the third day, the story had stabilized into something familiar. A missing woman, a worried husband, a community holding its breath. That familiarity was exactly what Ethan Wright relied on. Patterns were comforting. Patterns allowed people to stop thinking. From the outside, his life appeared suspended, paused mid-crisis. But beneath that surface, everything was moving. Calls were made. Meetings held behind closed doors. Information routed carefully, like blood diverted around a wound. Ethan sat at the head of the executive conference table on the 42nd floor of Wright Helix Group, hands folded, posture composed. The wall of glass behind him revealed San Francisco in sharp detail. Still water, fog rolling in slow sheets from the bay. The city looked indifferent. Cities always were. Vanessa Calder sat 2 seats to his right. She wore black, severe but tailored, her hair pulled back into a low knot that suggested discipline rather than grief. Her tablet lay untouched in front of her. She had not offered condolences. She had not asked how he was holding up. She was watching him. The board members spoke in careful language, circling the situation without touching it. Optics, one of them said. Volatility, said another. Temporary delegation of duties, suggested a third. Ethan listened, nodded when appropriate, interjected with reassurance when needed. He projected steadiness. He always had. This company doesn't pause because of personal matters, he said calmly. And neither do I. There were murmurs of agreement. Investors like resilience. They mistook it for virtue. Vanessa's eyes did not leave his face. When the meeting ended, she waited until the room emptied before standing. "You should have called me," she said. Her voice was low, controlled, intimate without warmth. "I'm handling it," Ethan replied. "That's what worries me." She stepped closer, close enough that anyone passing the glass wall might mistake them for collaborators deep in discussion. Her perfume was subtle, clean, the opposite of Eleanor's. No florals, no softness. Vanessa never wanted to be mistaken for anyone else. She left a note, Ethan said, which means she planned this. Vanessa's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Did she say anything specific? "I saw you. I know what you are." Vanessa exhaled through her nose. "That's vague." "Not to me." "Did she see us?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He didn't like answering questions he couldn't fully control. "She saw something," He said, finally, enough to run. Vanessa leaned back against the table. Running isn't the same as knowing. It is when the person running is smarter than you gave her credit for. Vanessa's lips pressed together. She had underestimated Eleanor from the start. Not intellectually. Vanessa respected competence. But strategically, Eleanor had seemed passive, domestic, removed from the machinery of power. A mistake. We need to assume worst case, Vanessa said. If she talks. She won't. Ethan, cut in. You're sure? Yes. The certainty in his voice surprised even him. It came not from evidence, but from understanding Eleanor's psychology. She didn't explode. She didn't lash out. She withdrew. She observed. She prepared. And if she had gone to the authorities, there would already be subpoenas. There's more, Ethan added. Vanessa waited. She didn't accuse me of cheating. That gave Vanessa pause. She accused me of being something. Vanessa's gaze sharpened. Then this isn't about us. No, Ethan said. It's about what you found. 300 miles south. Eleanor Wright sat at a small desk facing a blank wall, a laptop open in front of her. The apartment was modest, functional, deliberately forgettable. Beige carpet, neutral furniture. No art, no personal effects beyond what she needed. The kind of place no one noticed twice. She wore loose clothing, soft fabrics that accommodated her growing body without drawing attention. Her hair was pulled back, her face bare. She looked less like a missing woman than a graduate student on a deadline. On the screen in front of her, numbers moved. Accounts, transfers, dates. Eleanor's world had always been structured by patterns. She found comfort in them, not because they were predictable, but because they were honest. Numbers didn't lie. People did. 6 months earlier, the patterns had started whispering. Small discrepancies at first, rounding errors, timing mismatches, funds that moved at odd hours, routed through subsidiaries that existed more on paper than in practice. Nothing egregious, nothing obvious, nothing that would have raised alarms with an external audit. But Eleanor had spent a decade learning how crimes hid in plain sight. She knew how sophisticated theft disguised itself as efficiency. She knew how fraud wore the clothes of innovation. She had mentioned it once, casually, over dinner. "Have you changed the way internal transfers are timed?" she'd asked. Ethan had smiled, kissed her cheek, and said, "You're not working anymore, Ellie. Try not to see ghosts." She hadn't argued. She had watched. She'd placed a tracker on his car, not because she suspected an affair, but because time mattered, because movement mattered, because lies left footprints. When she'd seen the repeated stops at a secluded cafe in Mill Valley, nowhere near his office, nowhere near investor routes, she'd taken note. When she'd matched those visits with unusual transaction timestamps, she felt the first true chill of certainty. The affair had been disappointing, but the money had been devastating. The night she'd gone to the cafe herself, parking across the street, her hand steady on the wheel despite the pressure in her chest. She had not expected the kiss. She had expected documents. When Ethan emerged with Vanessa, laughing, relaxed in a way he never was at home anymore, Eleanor had felt something tear loose inside her. Not heartbreak, clarity. Vanessa took an envelope from him. Thick, heavy, a handoff. Eleanor's instincts had screamed. She hadn't followed them home. She hadn't confronted him. She'd gone back to the house and stood in the nursery, one hand on the empty crib, the other on her stomach. That was when she made the decision. Running wasn't fear. Running was repositioning. Now, in the quiet apartment, Eleanor moved through data with surgical focus. She wasn't gathering evidence yet, not formally. She was mapping. She left her phone behind deliberately. A sacrifice, a clean break. She knew law enforcement would interpret it as panic. She wanted them to underestimate her. Her laptop chimed softly. An incoming secure message. SV, he's unraveling. Faster than expected. Eleanor allowed herself a single breath of satisfaction. SV was not a lover, not an accomplice, not what Ethan thought she was. SV was the best private investigator Eleanor could afford, and then some. They had met months earlier in an office overlooking downtown San Jose. Eleanor had walked in pregnant calm and asked for a consultation. What do you want me to find? SV had asked. My husband's blind spots. Eleanor had replied. SV had smiled then, slowly. Those are expensive. So is ignorance. Now, SV fed her updates in clipped, professional language. SV, he called his lawyer first. Then the police. He's building narrative. Eleanor typed back. Eleanor, good. Let him. SV, he thinks this is about infidelity. Eleanor, of course he does. SV, he hasn't noticed the money yet. Eleanor stared at the screen, fingers resting lightly on the keys. Eleanor, he will. Back in San Francisco, Detective Ryan Keller stood in Ethan Wright's home office, studying the shelves, books arranged by color, awards framed in glass, photographs that suggested happiness without documenting it. Keller had seen this kind of curation before. It told a story, but not the one people lived. You don't seem surprised, Keller said. Ethan looked up from the couch, where he sat with his elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped. About what? About the attention, Keller replied. Media, police, speculation. Ethan gave a tired smile. My life has always been public. Keller nodded. Public lives make for messy disappearances. She's not disappeared, Ethan said softly. She left. And you're okay with that? I'm not okay with anything, Ethan replied. But I understand Eleanor. She needs control. Keller studied him. You talk about her like a colleague. Ethan met his gaze. She was my equal. Keller said nothing. Silence pressed in, the kind that tested nerves. Finally, Keller spoke again. Your wife's background, corporate analysis, compliance, forensics. Yes. She ever talk shop with you? Sometimes. Ever mention concerns about your business? Ethan's answer came too quickly. No. Keller noted it mentally. Later that night, alone in his car, Keller reviewed the case file again. The note, the timing, the absence of chaos. Something about it bothered him. This didn't feel like a woman running from danger. It felt like a woman creating it. Eleanor closed her laptop and leaned back, one hand resting on her belly. The baby kicked lightly, as if sensing movement. I know, she murmured. We're almost there. She stood, moved to the window, and looked out at a parking lot lit by sodium lamps. Ordinary, forgettable, safe. Ethan believed he was waiting for answers. In reality, he was being studied, and Chapter 2 ended not with revelation, but with alignment. The pieces moving closer, the net tightening, the quiet understanding that whatever Ethan thought he was hiding, Eleanor already knew how to expose it. By the end of the first week, the tone shifted. It always did. At first, disappearances invited sympathy, then curiosity, then suspicion. By day 7, the narrative hardened into something colder, something edged with judgment. The public began to ask questions that sounded reasonable on the surface and poisonous underneath. Why would a pregnant woman leave without telling anyone? What kind of marriage was she running from? What kind of man lets his wife vanish? Ethan Wright felt the pressure before he saw it. It arrived in subtle ways. Emails from partners that began with concern and ended with distance. Calls returned slower than usual, a noticeable hesitation when his name was mentioned in rooms that once bent toward him automatically. Power didn't disappear overnight. It eroded, and erosion was dangerous because it was quiet. He sat in his office late on a Wednesday evening. The city outside reduced to a grid of light. His assistant had gone home hours earlier. The cleaning staff moved through the hallways like ghosts. Ethan stared at a spreadsheet on his monitor without seeing it. Vanessa called or knocked once and entered without waiting. "You need to see this," she said. She placed her tablet on his desk and turned the screen toward him. It was a news article from a major financial outlet, the kind that liked to pretend it didn't chase drama. Questions mount as CEO's pregnant wife remains missing. Below the headline was a photo of Ethan, candid, jaw set, eyes slightly shadowed. The article was careful, no accusations, just insinuations. Quotes from unnamed sources close to family. A former colleague of Eleanor's describing her as methodical and not prone to emotional decisions. Vanessa watched his face as he read. "They're laying groundwork," she said. "This is the soft phase." Ethan leaned back. For what? For the pivot, from sympathy to scrutiny. He rubbed his temple. She hasn't contacted anyone. That should count for something. "It counts for uncertainty," Vanessa replied. "And uncertainty makes people nervous." Ethan's phone buzzed again. Another notification, this time from his bank. "Alert, account review in progress. Temporary restrictions may apply." His stomach tightened. He clicked through the message, scrolling fast, scanning for context. "This is new," he said. Vanessa straightened. "What is—" "My personal account," Ethan replied. "It's flagged." Vanessa's expression changed, just slightly. "Flagged how?" "Review. Temporary." She frowned. "That shouldn't be happening." "It shouldn't," Ethan agreed. "Unless—" He didn't finish the sentence. Unless someone had raised a question. Unless something had tripped a system that wasn't designed to care about optics or public narratives. Vanessa picked up her tablet, fingers moving quickly. "I'm checking now." Ethan stood and walked to the window, his reflection superimposed over the city. He thought of Eleanor's note again. "I know what you are." At the time, he'd assumed it was emotional language, moral language. Now he wasn't so sure. Eleanor felt the shift from her end, too. It arrived as a message from SV, marked urgent. "SV, we have movement. Financial institutions are quietly freezing peripheral accounts tied to Right Helix subsidiaries." Eleanor's fingers paused over keyboard. "Eleanor, that's early." "SV, someone nudged compliance. Didn't go public. Didn't involve law enforcement. But the systems noticed." Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. "Eleanor, good. SV, Ethan doesn't know yet." Eleanor smiled faintly, then typed. "Eleanor, he will—" She leaned back in her chair, breathing slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle. This was the inflection point, the place where preparation either proved itself or collapsed. 6 months earlier, she had discovered the first hidden ledger buried deep in a subsidiary's back end. It hadn't screamed fraud. It whispered it. Deferred liabilities parked offshore. Revenues mirrored through shell entities. Compliance language weaponized to obscure intent. Eleanor had not confronted Ethan then. She had gone quiet. She'd studied his habits instead. How often he checked certain accounts, which nights he worked late, when he became careless. She had noticed his increasing reliance on Vanessa. The way decisions that once crossed Ethan's desk began routing through her office. The affair had been insulting. The conspiracy had been unforgivable. Eleanor's plan had never been about disappearing forever. It had been about forcing Ethan into motion, about creating a vacuum he couldn't resist filling. Men like Ethan Wright didn't sit with uncertainty. They acted. They overcorrected. They revealed themselves. SV's next message arrived. SV, he's calling emergency meetings. Try and consolidate access. He thinks this is a leak. Eleanor, it is. SV, he's also trying to move data. Old backups. Off-site. Eleanor's jaw tightened. Eleanor, track everything. Don't intervene yet. SV, copy that. Eleanor stood and paced the room slowly, one hand braced against the small of her back. The baby shifted again, heavier now, more insistent. We're almost done, she whispered. Ethan's panic did not look like panic. It looked like decisiveness. By Thursday morning, he was in crisis mode, issuing instructions, demanding reports, pulling Vanessa and the IT director into closed-door meetings. He spoke in clipped phrases, his voice steady, his eyes too alert. Who has access to legacy accounts? Any unscheduled audits? Who's been pulling data from a Cayman node? The answers came hesitantly. No one unauthorized. Nothing formal. Some remote activity, but nothing flagged. Nothing flagged was not reassuring. Ethan stood behind his desk, fingers drumming against the wood, run a full access log. Every entry, every timestamp. Vanessa watched him carefully. You think this is her? I think it's connected. Vanessa crossed her arms. Eleanor doesn't have access anymore. Ethan's gaze snapped to her. Access is a variable, not a wall. Vanessa hesitated, then nodded. If she's doing this, it's bigger than a marriage. It always was, Ethan said. The door opened suddenly. His assistant appeared, pale. Mr. Wright, she said, voice low. There's a Detective Keller here to see you. Says it can't wait. Vanessa's eyes flicked to Ethan. Ethan exhaled slowly. Of course there is. Detective Keller stood in the lobby this time, not the house. Neutral ground, public enough to behave. Mr. Wright, Keller said, extending a hand. Ethan shook it. Detective. Keller didn't sit when offered. We've had an inquiry from a federal agency. Ethan's face remained composed. About my wife? Indirectly, Keller replied. They're looking at financial irregularities connected to your company. Nothing criminal yet. Ethan echoed. Keller studied him. Your wife's background is relevant here. She's not here to answer questions. No, Keller agreed, which is unfortunate. Ethan smiled thinly. You think she's behind this? I think she knew something, Keller said, and I think she left because of it. And you think I'm involved. I think, Keller said carefully, that people rarely disappear to escape nothing. Ethan said nothing. Keller continued, if your wife contacts you, she hasn't, you're required to inform us immediately. Of course. Keller nodded once. One more thing. Yes. The note, Keller said. It wasn't emotional. It was declarative. Ethan's smile faded. That's not how victims write, Keller continued. That's how witnesses do. Keller turned and walked away. That night, Ethan returned home alone. The house felt different now, not empty, but exposed. He walked through it, as if seeing it for the first time, his gaze lingering on details he'd once dismissed. The nursery door stood open. The purifier hummed softly in the corner, its digital display glowing faintly. Ethan stopped. The purifier. Eleanor had insisted on it, had researched it extensively, had paid for upgrades he considered excessive. He knelt and examined it more closely, fingers brushing the casing. Nothing obvious. Still, unease crawled up his spine. Upstairs in the home office, he opened his laptop and began accessing remote servers. His fingers moved fast, precise. He knew these systems better than anyone. He had designed them to obey him. The first firewall opened easily. The second hesitated. Then a notification appeared on his screen. Access delay detected. Verifying credentials. Ethan frowned. That had never happened before. Somewhere, 300 miles away, Eleanor watched the same moment unfold on her screen. The data stream updating in real time. SV. He's testing the perimeter. Eleanor, let him. SV. He's going to escalate. Eleanor's lips curved into a small, humorless smile. Eleanor, I know. She closed her laptop gently and sat back, listening to the quiet of the apartment. Outside, traffic passed. A siren wailed distantly, then faded. Ethan believed he was still choosing his moves. In reality, he had entered the part of the game where every move revealed more than it protected. And Chapter 3 ended not with an explosion, but with the unmistakable sense of momentum. Systems engaging, lines being crossed, and a man who had built his power on control beginning to understand what it felt like to lose it. By the time Ethan Wright realized this was no longer a situation he could manage quietly, the damage had already moved beyond him. It began with a denial. He stood at a gas station just off Highway 101, late Friday night, the fluorescent lights harsh against the polished black of his car. He slid his personal card into the pump without thinking, eyes still on his phone as he scanned an email from legal. The pump beeped once. Then again, transaction declined. Ethan frowned and tried again. Declined. He exhaled sharply, irritation flaring. He pulled out a different card, one tied to a separate account he rarely touched. Declined. For the first time since Eleanor vanished, something close to real fear surfaced. He climbed back into the car and dialed his private banker. It rang twice before going to voicemail. He tried again. No answer. The gas station attendant glanced over, curiosity flickering. Ethan felt suddenly conspicuous, reduced to a man stalled under bad lighting with no explanation that mattered. He drove off without fueling. By the time he reached the house, his phone was lighting up. Vanessa, Arthur Bellows, unknown numbers. He ignored them all and went straight upstairs to the office, to the one place where answers had always lived. The monitors glowed to life as he logged in, fingers moving with practiced certainty. The dashboard loaded, and then froze. A notification appeared, small but unmistakable. Temporary hold initiated. Pending review by Federal Compliance Authority. Ethan stared at the words. Federal. He slammed his palm against the desk once, hard enough to rattle the pen holder. No, he muttered. No, no, no. This wasn't how this happened. Not yet. Not like this. He pulled up internal communications, searching for leaks, for anything that explained the sudden escalation. His inbox populated with half-formed explanations. Routine, precautionary, out of our control. Out of control. The phrase felt foreign. Downstairs, the front door opened. Ethan stiffened. Vanessa's heels clicked against the hardwood as she crossed the foyer and mounted the stairs without waiting to be invited. She entered the office already speaking. My accounts are frozen, she said, corporate and personal. Ethan turned to her slowly. Mine, too. They stood there, facing each other, two architects staring at a structure that had begun to collapse without asking permission. She did this, Vanessa said. Yes. But how? Vanessa pressed. She didn't have access. I made sure of it. Ethan laughed once, sharply. You made sure she didn't have permission. That's not the same thing. Vanessa's face tightened. What aren't you telling me? Ethan hesitated. That hesitation was a mistake. Vanessa stepped closer. Ethan! She was smarter than I thought, he said. Smarter than both of us. Vanessa crossed her arms, defensive now. This doesn't happen because of suspicion. Someone submitted something. Data. Documents. Ethan swallowed. Vanessa's voice dropped. Did she know about the Cayman structure? Ethan looked away. Vanessa stared at him, incredulous. You told her? I didn't tell her, Ethan snapped. She found patterns. That's what she does. Vanessa took a step back, as if reassessing the man in front of her. You said this was contained. It was, Ethan insisted, until she turned it into something else. Silence fell between them, heavy and electric. Vanessa broke it first. We need to move what we can. Now. There's nothing left to move, Ethan said. The primary channels are frozen. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Not all of them. Ethan hesitated again. That hesitation told her everything. There's a backup, she said slowly. Off books. Ethan didn't answer. Vanessa laughed softly, incredulously. You really are a narcissist. He met her gaze. You helped build this. Yes, Vanessa said, but I didn't hide a kill switch in a nursery. The words hit him like a slap. Vanessa saw the flicker of recognition cross his face. The purifier, she said. That ridiculous thing she obsessed over. Ethan's heart began to pound. He hadn't told anyone about that. Not Arthur. Not IT. Not even Vanessa. Ethan, she said quietly, tell me you didn't put the encryption key in that house. He didn't need to answer. Vanessa turned away, pacing. Jesus Christ. She never touched it, Ethan said. She didn't know. Vanessa stopped and faced him. She knew enough. The room seemed to shrink. Ethan grabbed his jacket. I'm going back. Now, Vanessa asked. Now. Media's outside. I don't care. That house is crawling with police. I don't care. Vanessa studied him, then nodded once. I'm coming. No. If this goes wrong, she said, it goes wrong for both of us. Detective Keller was finishing paperwork when the alert came through. Unauthorized remote access attempt. Escalating risk. He straightened, adrenaline cutting through the late-hour fatigue. This wasn't a grieving husband checking emails. This was someone trying to erase a trail. He grabbed his jacket and was out the door in under a minute. Eleanor felt it before SV told her. The data stream shifted, traffic spiking, access attempts overlapping, Ethan no longer probing but pushing. SV's message arrived seconds later. SV, he's moving. Physically. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. Eleanor, where? SV. Home. Eleanor stood slowly, the weight of her body grounding her. This was the moment she planned for, the one she counted on. Men like Ethan didn't let go. They lunged. Eleanor typed carefully. Eleanor, activate passive capture. Don't alert. SV, copy. Eleanor walked to the window and looked out, her reflection faint against the glass. She placed both hands over her stomach, feeling the steady, reassuring presence there. You're safe, she whispered. We did this right. Ethan and Vanessa arrived at the house just after midnight. The media vans were gone, but the streetlights made the place feel exposed, like a stage stripped of its audience. Ethan parked in the garage and rushed inside, ignoring the tightness in his chest. They climbed the stairs two at a time. The nursery door was open. The purifier hummed softly in the corner, exactly where Eleanor had insisted it be placed. Ethan crossed the room and knelt, fingers already finding the concealed panel beneath the casing. His hands shook as he entered the code. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the panel slid open. Inside sat the drive. Small, unassuming, a piece of plastic that had carried an empire. Ethan exhaled in relief, so sharp it hurt. Vanessa leaned against the doorframe. Get it, now. He didn't notice the tiny red light on the purifier's display flicker on. He didn't notice the faint click from the ceiling vent. He pulled the drive free and stood. We're not done, he said. Not yet. Vanessa looked less convinced. "Office," she said. "Now." They left the nursery behind, unaware that the room had just done exactly what Eleanor designed it to do. In the apartment, Eleanor watched the confirmation appear on her screen. Physical access confirmed. Live capture active. "SV." He took the bait. Eleanor sat down slowly. "Eleanor." "Good." "SV." He's panicking. Eleanor closed her laptop. "No," she said softly to the empty room. "He's exposing himself." And Chapter 4 ended with motion. Cars on dark highways, systems recording quietly, and a man clutching the last thing he thought could save him, unaware that the moment he touched it, he had already lost.